Congratulations, you've just woken up in California, 1849. The cold morning air stings your lungs as you inhale deeply, your breath forming little clouds that hang in front of your face before dissipating into the dawn. Your hands, once soft and unmarked, are now covered in calluses and small cuts that never quite heal. The weight of your pick and pan hang from your belt, the tools clanking against your leg with each step you take along the riverbank. The freezing water of the American River numbs your feet as you wade in, your worn boots offering little protection against the biting cold. It's early spring, and the snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada mountains has turned the gentle stream into a rushing torrent, the water level higher than it's been in weeks. You shiver, not just from the cold, but from anticipation. Today might be the day. Today might be the day you strike it rich. The gold rush began just a year ago, in January 1848, when James Marshall found those first few flakes of gold in the mill race at Sutter's Mill. News travelled slowly at first, but when President Polk confirmed the discovery in December, gold fever swept across America and beyond. Now, the non-native population of California has exploded from around 800 to nearly 100,000 people, all chasing the same dream. You're one of them, a 49er, they call you. You bend down, your back aching from weeks of this same motion, and scoop some gravel from the riverbed into your pan. Your fingers, red and stiff from the cold, grip the edge of the metal pan as you swirl the water around, washing away the lighter dirt and sand. The sound of the rushing river drowns out everything else, creating a strange cocoon of solitude, despite the dozen other miners scattered along the banks nearby. Each man keeps to himself, eyes fixed on his own patch of river, his own pan, his own dreams. The water in your pan gradually clears as you wash away the dirt. Your heart beats a little faster, that familiar flutter of hope rising in your chest. You tilt the pan, carefully letting the water spill out, watching for that telltale glint of yellow among the black sand at the bottom. But today, like most days, there's nothing. You sigh, the weight of disappointment settling on your shoulders like a heavy coat. It's been 3 weeks since you found even a speck of gold. Your supplies are running low, and the prices at the general store in the nearest camp keep climbing higher. A simple loaf of bread now costs 20 times what it would back east. You haven't written to your family in months, too ashamed to admit that the fortune you promised to send back hasn't materialized. A sudden shout breaks your concentration. Downstream, a young man is leaping up and down, his pan clutched to his chest. I found one, he cries, his voice cracking with excitement. The other miners pause their work, watching with a mixture of envy and renewed hope. If he found gold here today, maybe there's more to be had. You feel that familiar surge of determination. If not this scoop, then the next. If not today, then tomorrow. That's the thing about gold fever. It never quite lets you go. The sun climbs higher as you continue to work, your stomach growling with hunger. You've been rationing your food, eating just enough to keep going. A bit of salted pork and hardtack for breakfast, maybe some beans if you're lucky enough to have them. Fresh vegetables are a distant memory, a luxury you can't afford. Many miners have developed scurvy from the lack of proper nutrition, their gums bleeding and teeth loosening. You run your tongue across your own teeth, wondering if they feel a bit more wobbly than before. By midday, the chill has left the air, replaced by the warm California sun. You've moved 100 yards upstream, hoping for better luck. Your back screams in protest as you straighten up, arching to ease the pain. That's when you spot him, a man stumbling along the opposite bank, his clothes hanging in tatters from his gaunt frame. He looks like he hasn't eaten in days, his beard wild and eyes sunken. Another failed prospector, one of many who came with dreams of gold and found only hardship. You've heard the stories. For every miner who strikes it rich, hundreds return home broke or don't return at all. Disease runs rampant through the mining camps. Cholera, dysentery, tuberculosis. Men die from infected wounds, mining accidents, or in drunken brawls. The journey west alone claimed countless lives. Along the 2,000 miles of trail from the east, they say 10 to 15 people died every mile, succumbing to disease, starvation, or accidents with the very firearms they brought to protect themselves. The man across the river catches you watching him and raises a hand in weary greeting. You return the gesture. There's a kind of brotherhood among miners, a shared understanding of the risks you've all taken in coming here. Tomorrow, it could be you stumbling along the riverbank, hollow-eyed and empty-handed. As the sun begins its descent, you decide to try one more spot before heading back to camp. You make your way to a bend in the river where the current slows, creating a natural place for heavier materials, like gold, to settle. Your muscles protest as you bend down once more, scooping gravel into your pan. This time, as you swirl and wash the sediment, your breath catches. There, among the black sand, is a tiny flake of gold, no bigger than a grain of rice. It's small, but it's real, proof that there is gold here, that your dreams aren't entirely foolish. Carefully, you transfer the flake to the small leather pouch hanging around your neck, joining the meager collection you've gathered over the weeks. Not enough to make you rich, not even enough to cover your expenses, but enough to keep you going another day. The walk back to camp takes nearly an hour, your tired legs protesting every step. The mining camp has sprung up like a strange, hasty town, a collection of tents, crude wooden shacks, and the occasional sturdier building housing a saloon or general store. The smell hits you first. Unwashed bodies, cooking fires, human waste, and the ever-present mud churned up by thousands of boots. It's not a pleasant smell, but after months here, you barely notice it anymore. Men gather around fires as darkness falls, sharing meals and stories. Some play cards or dice, gambling away what little gold they've found. Others drink whiskey from chipped cups, seeking temporary escape from their aching bodies and disappointed hopes. The saloon is doing a brisk business as it does every night. Inside, you know you'd find miners drowning their sorrows while a few exhausted women circulate among them, offering companionship at a steep price. Women are a rare sight in the gold fields. Of the 40,000 people who arrived by ship to San Francisco Bay in 1849, only 700 were women. Some are wives who followed their husbands west, others are enterprising souls who realized that services, cooking, laundry, boarding houses could bring more reliable income than mining itself. And yes, some work in the brothels attached to saloons, their lives as harsh as any miner's, maybe harsher. You make your way to your own shelter, a small tent reinforced with whatever scrap wood you could find. Inside, your few possessions are neatly arranged: a bedroll, a change of clothes, a small stove for cooking and warmth, your mining tools, and a battered book of poetry that reminds you of home. You light a candle, its yellow flame casting long shadows on the canvas walls. Dinner is a handful of beans cooked with a strip of salt pork, eaten straight from the pot while it's still hot enough to burn your tongue. You wash it down with metallic-tasting water from your canteen. As you eat, you think about the tiny gold flake you found today. Not much, but more than nothing. Maybe tomorrow will bring better luck. The night grows cold quickly, the heat of the day vanishing with the sun. You wrap yourself in your blanket, the wool scratchy against your skin, but welcome against the chill. Outside, you can hear the murmur of voices, an occasional burst of laughter or shouting from the direction of the saloon. Someone is playing a harmonica, the melancholy tune drifting through the camp. Sleep doesn't come easily. Your body aches from the day's labour and your mind races with calculations. How much gold would you need to find to make the journey worthwhile? How much longer can you afford to stay if your luck doesn't improve? What would it mean to return home empty-handed, to face the knowing looks of those who said you were chasing a fool's dream? Just as you're drifting off, a gunshot shatters the night. You sit bolt upright, heart pounding. More shots follow, then shouting. A fight at the saloon, most likely. Such things are common here, where law is scarce and tempers run hot. You lie back down, pulling the blanket over your ears. Not your problem. Not tonight. Morning comes too soon, the pale light filtering through the canvas of your tent. Every muscle in your body protests as you rise, stiff from the cold and yesterday's labour, but there's no rest for a gold miner. You force down a breakfast of hardtack and coffee, the latter a luxury you allow yourself to face the day ahead. Outside, the camp is already stirring. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Men gather their tools for another day at the river. You learn that last night's shooting left 2 men dead. An argument over a card game that escalated too quickly. Their bodies lie covered with blankets outside the saloon, waiting for the camp's unofficial undertaker to dig 2 more graves on the hillside that serves as a cemetery. No one seems particularly disturbed by the death. Life is cheap in the gold fields. You head back to the river, your pick and pan in hand. The spot where you found yesterday's small flake seems promising, so you return there, hoping for better luck. The morning passes in the same rhythm of bend, scoop, swirl, check. Bend, scoop, swirl, check. The sun climbs higher, warming your back as you work. Midway through the morning, a cry goes up from downstream, not the excited shout of a gold find, but a sound of pain and fear. You straighten up, shading your eyes against the sun to see what's happening. A man is clutching his leg, blood seeping between his fingers. Around him, other miners are gathering, offering help or simply spectating. You make your way over, curious despite yourself. The injured man is young, barely out of his teens, his face pale with shock and pain. He's managed to gash his leg deeply with his own pick, a common enough accident among tired miners working on uneven ground. "Someone fetch Doc Wilson," one of the older miners says, tying a bandana around the young man's leg as a makeshift tourniquet. Doc Wilson isn't a real doctor. He was a barber back east who knows a bit about anatomy and carries a case of surgical instruments, but he's the closest thing to medical help for miles around. You've seen his work before. Sometimes the patients live, sometimes they don't. Infections are common, and Wilson's instruments aren't always as clean as they should be. You help carry the injured man back to camp, his blood soaking through the leg of his trousers. He's light in your arms, too light. Another miner wasted away from too little food and too much hard work. By the time you reach Wilson's tent, the young man is barely conscious, his face the colour of ash. Doc Wilson is a gruff man with hands like hams and breath that reeks of whiskey, even this early in the day. He cuts away the blood-soaked fabric and examines the wound, his expression grim. "Deep!" he grunts. "Might have nicked the artery. Going to need stitches." He pulls a bottle from his coat pocket and offers it to the young man. "Drink this, as much as you can stomach. It's going to hurt." The makeshift surgery that follows is brutal to watch. The young miner screams despite the whiskey, his body bucking against the hands that hold him down. Wilson's needle dips in and out of flesh, drawing the wound closed with catgut thread. The smell of blood fills the tent, metallic and sickening. When it's over, the young man lies unconscious, his breathing shallow. Wilson wipes his bloody hands on a rag. "We'll know by morning if he'll keep the leg," he says, matter-of-factly, "or if he'll live at all. Infection's the real killer." You nod, knowing he's right. You've seen men die from smaller wounds, their bodies consumed by fever and putrefaction in a matter of days. The young miner's mining days might be over before they've really begun. Back at the river, you try to focus on your work, but the image of the young man's pain stays with you. Is this all worth it? The risk, the hardship, the danger? For what? The slim chance of finding enough gold to change your life? But then you remember the stories, the ones that keep everyone going. The miner who found a nugget the size of his fist. The group who extracted 273 pounds of gold in a single week. The ordinary men who became wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. It could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. The afternoon wears on, the sun hot on your neck. You find 2 more tiny flakes of gold, barely visible to the naked eye. Not enough to celebrate, but enough to keep the hope alive for another day. As you work, you notice a group of Chinese miners setting up downstream. They keep to themselves, as they must. Anti-Chinese sentiment runs high in the camps, with many American miners viewing them as unwelcome competition. Laws like the foreign miners' tax target them specifically, forcing them to pay exorbitant fees for the privilege of mining. Despite this, they persist, often working claims abandoned by white miners, extracting gold that others missed through meticulous, patient work. You've heard that the Chinese miners have their own methods, their own systems of organisation. They work collectively, sharing labour and profits in ways that the fiercely independent American miners rarely consider. Watching them now, you can see the efficiency in their movements, the way they communicate with quick gestures and few words. A shout from upstream draws your attention. Two miners are facing off, their stances aggressive. One holds a pick handle like a club, the other has his hand hovering near a pistol at his waist. Claim jumping, one miner accusing another of working his territory, is a common cause of violence. You've seen men killed over less. For a tense moment, it seems the confrontation will erupt into violence. Then a third miner steps between them, hands raised, speaking words you can't hear from this distance. Gradually, the tension ebbs. The men separate, throwing dark looks over their shoulders, but moving away from each other. Crisis averted, at least for now. You return to your own work, aware of how quickly peace can shatter in this place where men are driven by desperation and dreams. The gold fields bring out both the best and worst in people, incredible generosity alongside shocking cruelty, moments of brotherhood punctuated by deadly selfishness. As the sun begins to set, you pack up your tools, your pouch of gold flakes barely heavier than it was this morning. Your stomach growls with hunger, reminding you that you haven't eaten since your meagre breakfast. The walk back to camp seems longer today, your legs leaden with fatigue. The camp has changed since morning. A wagon has arrived, bringing supplies and, more importantly, mail from back east. Men are gathered around the general store, eager for news from home and whatever luxuries the wagon might have brought. You join the crowd, hoping there might be a letter for you. It's been months since you've had news from your family. Do they still wait for your return? Do they still believe in your promise to come back wealthy and triumphant? The storekeeper calls out names, handing over letters and small packages to their eager recipients. When he calls your name, your heart leaps. There is a letter, the paper worn from its long journey. You recognise your mother's handwriting immediately, the sight of it bringing a lump to your throat. You retreat to a quiet spot to read, your dirty fingers carefully unfolding the delicate paper. Your mother's words flow across the page, bringing news of home, your sister's new baby, your father's continuing struggle with his farm, the neighbour boy who went off to California just like you and returned 3 months later, broken in body and spirit. We pray for your safety every day, she writes. Gold or no gold, we just want you to come home whole. The letter brings both comfort and a fresh wave of homesickness. You fold it carefully and tuck it inside your shirt, close to your heart. One more reason to keep going, to not give up. You need to make this journey mean something. That night, as you prepare for sleep in your small tent, you can hear the camp around you settling for the night. Someone is telling a story at a nearby fire, his voice rising and falling dramatically as his audience laughs. From the saloon comes the tinny sound of a piano, slightly out of tune, but cheerful nonetheless. A dog barks, the sound echoing across the camp. Despite the hardships, there's a strange kind of community here, a bond formed between men who have risked everything for the same dream. You've never been one to make friends easily, but here you've found a kind of belonging. The gruff nod of recognition from a fellow miner, the shared meal around a fire, the unspoken understanding of what brought you all to this place. These small connections sustain you almost as much as the hope of gold. As sleep finally claims you, your thoughts drift to tomorrow, another day at the river, another chance to change your fortune. In your dreams, the water runs golden, and you scoop up handfuls of shining nuggets, your future suddenly bright and certain. It's a good dream, one that will make the harsh reality of morning a little easier to bear. You wake before dawn, your body now accustomed to the early rising of a miner's life. Outside your tent, the camp is quiet, most men still wrapped in their blankets, stealing a few more minutes of precious sleep. The air is cold and clear, the stars still visible in the fading night sky. As you prepare for another day, heating water for coffee over your small stove, you think about the choices that brought you here. The poster you saw in your hometown, promising fortunes for anyone brave enough to make the journey west, the skepticism of your father, the tears of your mother, the envious looks from friends who didn't have the courage to go themselves. The journey itself, 2,000 grueling miles across prairies, mountains and deserts, facing cholera outbreaks, hostile encounters, river crossings that claimed wagons and lives. You were one of the lucky ones. You survived when others didn't. That has to mean something. Your coffee is bitter but hot, the warmth spreading through your chest as you drink it standing outside your tent, watching the camp come to life around you. Another day begins in the California goldfields, another chance to make your fortune or break your heart. Either way, you'll face it standing, pick in hand, dreams intact despite everything. Because that's what it means to be a 49er, to believe that today might be the day, that the next pan might hold the nugget that changes everything, and so you head back to the river, back to the endless cycle of hope and disappointment that defines life in the Wild West gold rush. The water of the American river bites at your ankles with icy teeth. 3 months have passed since you arrived in the gold fields, and spring has given way to early summer. The snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada still feeds the river, keeping it cold even as the air grows warmer. Your hands, once tender and quick to blister, have toughened into calloused tools, nearly as hard as the rocks you overturn each day in your search for gold. You've moved upstream from your original spot, following rumours of better yields. The work remains the same, the endless cycle of bending, scooping, swirling and hoping. But something has changed in the way you approach it. The frantic energy of your early days has been replaced by a methodical patience. You've learned that gold doesn't reveal itself to the desperate or the careless. It rewards the observant, the persistent, the ones who understand the river's secrets. This morning, you're trying something new. Simple panning has yielded too little gold to sustain you, so you've pooled resources with 2 other miners to build a cradle, or rocker box. It's a simple wooden device that looks something like a baby's cradle, hence the name, with a sieve at the top, a canvas or blanket along an angled base, and a series of cleats to catch the heavier gold particles. One man digs the gravel and feeds it into the sieve. Another, that's you today, pours water over the gravel while rocking the cradle from side to side. The third man keeps an eye on the process and helps wherever needed. The cradle can process more material than panning alone, which means a better chance of finding gold. At least that's the theory. "More water," shouts Jacob, a burly Pennsylvanian who's been mining longer than you have. You pour another bucket over the gravel, watching as the water carries the dirt through the sieve, leaving larger rocks behind. The muddy water flows over the canvas lining where gold particles should catch on the rough surface while the lighter sediment washes away. The sun beats down on your back as you work, sweat sticking your shirt to your skin. Your shoulders burn from the repetitive motion of pouring and rocking, but the discomfort fades when Jacob points excitedly at the bottom of the cradle. "Look there! We've got colour!" Sure enough, tiny flecks of gold glint in the sunlight caught in the cleats of the rocker box. Not a fortune, but more than you'd have found in a day of panning. The sight sends a renewed surge of energy through your tired body. This might work. This might actually work. By midday, your trio has processed enough gravel to yield a small but respectable amount of gold. You divide it equally, each man adding his share to his own pouch. You've made more today than in the past 3 days combined. It's still not enough to make you rich, but it's enough to buy supplies for another week. Maybe splurge on a real meal at the camp's makeshift restaurant instead of your usual beans and hardtack. As you break for a quick lunch, jerky and stale bread washed down with river water, you notice a group of men working further upstream. They're constructing something larger than a cradle, driving stakes into the riverbank and nailing together long wooden troughs. "What are they building?" you ask Jacob, nodding toward the activity. "Sluice boxes," he says, tearing off a piece of jerky with his teeth. "Next step up from our cradle, can process even more gravel. Need more men to work it properly though, and more water." You watch with interest. The mining methods are evolving rapidly as men share knowledge and experiment with new techniques. Those who adapt quickest stand the best chance of success. The easy gold, the surface nuggets that could be picked up by hand in the early days, are long gone. Now, it takes more sophisticated methods to extract the precious metal from the earth. "We should try that next," you suggest, already calculating how many more men you'd need to recruit, how much lumber you'd have to buy or scavenge to build a proper sluice. Jacob shrugs. "Maybe. If this cradle keeps paying out, might be best to stick with what works for now." Your third partner, a quiet Irishman named Sullivan, speaks up for the first time. "Men are dying from the work, you know, not just accidents. The dust." He taps his chest. "Gets in your lungs. Saw a fellow coughing up blood last week." You've heard similar stories. Miners developing chronic coughs, struggling to breathe after years of inhaling stone dust. Some call it miner's consumption or silicosis, a slow, suffocating death that comes from within. Just another risk in a life already filled with danger. "We all die of something," Jacob says philosophically. "Might as well die rich." After lunch, you return to the cradle, settling back into the rhythm of the work. Your mind wanders as your body performs the familiar motions. You think about the men who've already left California, either broken by failure or satisfied with modest success. You think about the letters from home, the mounting pressure to return, the growing fear that you're chasing a fool's dream. But then there are days like today, when the gold appears as if by magic, glinting in the sunlight, promising that the next scoop might contain even more. It's enough to keep you going, enough to silence the doubts for a little while longer. The afternoon wears on, the heat intensifying. Across the river, you notice a small group of Native Americans watching the mining operations. They keep their distance, and you can't blame them. Relations between miners and the indigenous populations have been tense at best, violent at worst. The gold rush has been devastating for California's native peoples. Disease, starvation, and outright violence have decimated their numbers. Before the gold rush, the indigenous population of California numbered some 300,000. Now, just a year into the rush, thousands have already perished, pushed off their lands, exposed to new diseases, or attacked by miners seeing them as obstacles to wealth. The state government, eager to support the mining industry, has turned a blind eye to these atrocities, even funding what amount to death squads. You've heard whispers of massacres, of entire villages wiped out. Such stories are shared in hushed tones around campfires, met with uncomfortable silence, or worse, approval from some of the harder men. You try not to think about it too much. What can one miner do against such sweeping injustice? But the knowledge sits uneasily in your stomach, another shadow darkening the golden dream that brought you west. As the sun begins its descent, you and your partners decide to call it a day. The cradle has yielded a decent amount of gold, not a fortune, but enough to call the day a success. You dismantle the device, hiding the components in different locations to prevent theft. Trust only goes so far in the gold fields. The walk back to camp is more pleasant than usual, your spirits lifted by the day's modest success. The camp itself has grown in the months you've been here, transforming from a haphazard collection of tents into something resembling a small town. Wooden structures have replaced many of the canvas shelters. There's a proper general store now, a barbershop, 3 saloons, and even a small church built by a missionary who arrived last month. Law, too, has come to the camp, of a sort. A man named Fletcher, a former sheriff from Ohio, has been elected camp constable. He's not exactly official. California isn't even officially a state yet, but he keeps a semblance of order, breaking up fights before they turn deadly, and occasionally locking up the most disruptive drunks in a crude jail behind the largest saloon. The changes reflect a shifting reality. What began as a temporary gold rush is evolving into something more permanent. Men who came for quick riches are putting down roots, building businesses that serve the mining community. The smart ones have realized that selling supplies to miners is often more profitable than mining itself. A shovel that cost $1 back east can sell for $15 here. A dozen eggs might go for a small fortune. You pass by one of the saloons, the Nugget, where raucous laughter spills out along with the tinny notes of a piano. A painted sign outside advertises "Dancing Girls Tonight," though you know from experience that the dancing is a thin pretense for other services offered. Women remain scarce in the camp, and those who are here often find they can earn more in an hour at the saloon than most miners make in a week. At the general store, you spend a small pinch of your day's gold on supplies: coffee, beans, salt pork, and a luxury you've been eyeing for weeks, a small bottle of lemon extract. It's expensive, but you've heard it can prevent scurvy, the disease that's been claiming miners who subsist too long on a diet lacking fresh fruits and vegetables. Your gums have been bleeding when you brush your teeth, a warning sign you can't ignore. The storekeeper measures your gold dust carefully on a small scale, then hands over your purchases. "Heard there was a strike up at Angel's Camp," he says conversationally. "Fella found a nugget big as his thumb yesterday." Your heart quickens at the news. Angel's Camp is only a day's journey away. Perhaps it would be worth checking out. But then again, such rumours fly constantly through the camps, and by the time most miners arrive at the site of a reported strike, the best claims are already taken. "Might ride up there next week," you say non-committally. "See what's what." The storekeeper nods, wise to wait a bit. Let others do the rushing. Outside, you encounter Sullivan, your Irish partner from the day's work. He's sitting on a barrel, smoking a pipe, his face thoughtful in the fading light. "Good day's work," you offer, stopping beside him. He nods. "Good enough, better than most." He taps his pipe against his boot, knocking out the ash. "Thinking of heading north. Heard there's new finds up in the Trinity River area." The news surprises you. "We just got the cradle working well. Why leave now?" Sullivan shrugs. Man can spend his whole life working a claim that gives just enough to keep him going, never enough to get ahead. Sometimes you need to take a chance, find fresh ground. He looks at you. You're welcome to come along, Jacob too, if he's willing. You promise to think about it, though in truth, you're reluctant to leave. You've established yourself here, know the terrain, have a shelter that keeps out most of the rain and wind. Starting over somewhere new means new risks, new unknowns. Back at your own tent, you cook a simple dinner over your small stove, the familiar smells of beans and pork filling the small space. The luxury of the lemon extract waits for after the meal, a few precious drops in a cup of water. The sharp citrus taste an explosion of flavour after months of bland food. As you eat, you think about Sullivan's offer. The Trinity River is further north, deeper into California's wild interior. The journey would be difficult, and there's no guarantee the rumours of gold are any more substantial than the hundreds of other stories that circulate through the camps. But the thought of fresh ground, of claims not yet picked over by thousands of desperate men, is tempting. Night falls fully, and you light your candle, its warm glow pushing back the darkness. From your pocket, you pull out the letter from home, reading it again, fingers tracing your mother's handwriting. The homesickness rises in your throat like a physical thing, nearly choking you with its intensity. How much longer will you stay? How much longer can you endure the back-breaking work, the constant disappointment punctuated by just enough success to keep hope alive? And if you do go home, will it be with gold in your pockets or with empty hands and a heart heavy with failure? Questions without answers spin through your mind as you prepare for sleep. Tomorrow will bring another day at the river, another day of bending and lifting, hoping and despairing. The gold fever that brought you west still burns in your blood, but its heat is tempered now by reality, by the understanding that for most men, the California dream will remain just that, a dream. Morning brings a surprise. As you emerge from your tent, stretching in the early light, Jacob approaches with a newspaper in his hand. It's several weeks old, having travelled the long route from the East Coast, but it's the first news you've had from the wider world in months. "Thought you might want to see this," Jacob says, handing you the paper. "They're talking about making California a state." You scan the article with interest. There's debate in Congress about admitting California to the Union, complicated by the question of slavery. California wants to enter as a free state, which would upset the delicate balance between slave and free states. It's a distant political concern compared to the immediate challenges of finding enough gold to eat, but it reminds you that the world continues to turn beyond the borders of your mining camp. "Statehood might bring more law and order," you comment, handing the paper back. "Maybe even proper roads." Jacob snorts. "Might bring more taxes, more regulations, government men telling us where we can and can't dig." He spits on the ground. "I came west to get away from all that. It's a common sentiment among the miners, many of whom value the freedom of the frontier as much as the promise of gold. Out here, a man answers to no one but himself and whatever informal rules the mining camp establishes. Statehood might change that, bringing the structures of civilization that many have deliberately left behind. The day's work cools, however, and political speculation gives way to the practical concerns of mining. You and Jacob meet Sullivan at the river, setting up the cradle in the same spot that yielded well yesterday. The routine is familiar now. Dig, sift, rock, pour, watch for the glint of gold in the muddy slurry. Midway through the morning, a commotion downstream catches your attention. A group of miners has surrounded two Chinese men who were working a small claim near the bend in the river. Even from a distance, the hostility is palpable. The white miners' postures aggressive as they crowd the Chinese workers. "Trouble," Sullivan mutters, pausing in his work to watch. The confrontation escalates quickly. One of the white miners shoves a Chinese man, sending him stumbling backward into the river. Another white miner grabs the Chinese worker's tools, throwing them into the water. Shouts echo across the river, though you can't make out the exact words. The meaning is clear enough, however. The Chinese miners are being driven off their claim. "Should we do something?" you ask, uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before you. Jacob shakes his head. "Not our business. Besides, those Celestials' work claims that white men have abandoned, taking gold that should be ours." Sullivan says nothing, but his expression suggests he doesn't share Jacob's view. Neither do you, if you're honest with yourself. The Chinese miners are known for their meticulous work, often extracting gold from ground that others have deemed worthless. Their success breeds resentment among white miners who see them as unwelcome competition. The foreign miners' tax, passed recently by the California legislature, specifically targets non-American miners, forcing them to pay $20 a month for the privilege of mining, an enormous sum that few can afford. It's a transparent attempt to drive Chinese, Mexican, and other foreign miners out of the goldfields, preserving the wealth for white Americans. The unfairness of it sits uneasily with you, but as Jacob said, it's not your business. You return to your work, trying to ignore the continued sounds of the confrontation downstream. By the time you look up again, the Chinese miners have gone, their claim now occupied by the white miners who drove them off. That's how it is out here, Jacob says, noticing your troubled expression. Gold makes men hard, makes them forget the rules they lived by back home. The day's yield is less impressive than yesterday's, despite working the same spot. That's the nature of gold mining. Feast or famine, with little predictability. By late afternoon, you've accumulated enough gold to buy food for a few days, but not much more. The dream of striking it rich seems as distant as ever. As you pack up the cradle, Sullivan makes his announcement. I'm heading north tomorrow. First light. He looks at you and Jacob. Last chance if you want to come along. Jacob immediately shakes his head. I'm staying put. Got a system working here. Don't see the sense in starting over. Sullivan nods, accepting the decision without argument, then turns his gaze to you. What about you? Fresh start, new ground, might be what you need. You hesitate. The thought has been turning in your mind since Sullivan first mentioned it. A change of scene, a new opportunity, possibly richer deposits not yet claimed by thousands of miners, but also new risks, unknown terrain, the danger of travelling through wilderness. I'll think on it tonight, you promise. Let you know in the morning. The walk back to camp is quieter than usual, each man lost in his own thoughts. The confrontation with the Chinese miners has cast a shadow over the day, a reminder of the uglier side of the gold rush. The promise of wealth has drawn men from around the world to these rivers and hills, but it hasn't created brotherhood or equality. If anything, it has heightened divisions, turned neighbour against neighbour in the scramble for riches. At the edge of camp, you part ways with your partners. Jacob heads for the saloon, as he does most evenings, seeking companionship and relief from the day's labour in whiskey and cards. Sullivan returns to his own tent to prepare for his journey north. You walk slowly toward your shelter, still undecided about whether to join him. Your tent feels especially small and lonely tonight. You light your candle and sit on your bedroll, pulling out your pouch of gold dust. 3 months of back-breaking work has yielded a pathetically small amount, not nearly enough to justify the hardships you've endured. If you're honest with yourself, you're no closer to making your fortune than when you arrived. Maybe Sullivan is right. Maybe fresh ground is what you need. A new start in a place where the gold might lie closer to the surface, more abundant, more accessible. Or maybe the truth is simpler and harsher. Maybe there are no easy riches to be had, only hard work with uncertain rewards. You tuck the pouch away and pull out your mother's letter again, the paper now soft and worn from multiple readings. "We just want you to come home whole," she wrote. What would she think of you now? Thinner, harder, your hands calloused and scarred, your face weathered by sun and wind? Would she even recognize the man you've become? Sleep comes fitfully, your dreams filled with rushing water and glinting gold just beyond your reach. You wake before dawn, your decision made in that hazy space between dreaming and waking. You'll go north with Sullivan. One more chance, one more attempt to find the fortune that brought you west. You pack quickly by candlelight, rolling your few possessions into a tight bundle. The tent you'll leave behind. Sullivan mentioned travelling light, and you can build a new shelter when you reach your destination. You keep only what's essential: your mining tools, cooking pot, bedroll, the small pouch of gold dust, and your mother's letter carefully folded inside your shirt pocket. As the first light of dawn breaks over the eastern hills, you make your way to Sullivan's tent. He's already up, packing the last of his belongings onto a small, scraggly mule he's purchased for the journey. "So you're coming," he says, though it's not really a question. Your packed bundle says enough. You nod. Fresh ground, worth a try. He claps you on the shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie from the usually reserved Irishman. "We'll make better luck up north. I feel it in my bones." The camp is still quiet as you set out, most miners still wrapped in sleep before another day at the river. You pass the saloon where Jacob likely spent the night, the general store where you traded your gold dust for supplies, the makeshift church where you never quite found the time to attend services. For better or worse, this place has been your home for 3 months. Now you're leaving it behind, chasing another rumour, another promise of gold. The road, really just a rutted trail worn by countless wagons and boots, leads north, away from the rising sun. Sullivan walks ahead, leading the mule, while you follow a few paces behind. The animal is laden with supplies: food, tools, a canvas for shelter, ammunition for Sullivan's rifle, enough to get you to the Trinity River, where you'll try your luck again. As the camp disappears behind you, a strange mixture of regret and excitement fills your chest. You're leaving certainty, however meagre, for the unknown, leaving established claims for unproven ground. It's a gamble, perhaps a foolish one, but then again, coming to California in the first place was a gamble. Your whole life has become a series of bets placed on the promise of gold. The trail winds through hills covered in dry grass and scattered oak trees. In the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains rise majestically, their peaks still capped with snow even in summer. It's beautiful country, you have to admit, a stark contrast to the muddy, torn-up riverbanks where you've spent your days mining. "How long to the Trinity River?" you ask Sullivan, breaking the companionable silence. "4 days if we make good time," he answers. "Maybe 5. Depends on the trails and whether we run into any trouble." Trouble could mean many things: hostile natives, bandits, wild animals, injury or illness far from any help. The California wilderness holds as many dangers as promises, but you've come too far to turn back now, risked too much to play it safe. The sun climbs higher as you walk, the heat building even though it's still early. Sweat trickles down your back and your water canteen is already half empty. You've exchanged one form of hard labour for another, it seems, but the road stretches ahead, leading north to new possibilities, new hopes. The gold fever still burns in your blood, driving you forward despite all reason, all evidence that the odds are stacked against you. After all, that's the story of the gold rush. Men driven by dreams, chasing fortune across mountains and deserts, enduring hardship and disappointment, always believing that the next claim, the next river, the next pan of gravel will finally reveal the riches they've sacrificed everything to find. The trail to the Trinity River grows steeper as you and Sullivan push northward. 2 days have passed since you left the American River Camp, 2 days of walking from sunrise to sunset, your shoulders aching from the weight of your pack, your feet developing fresh blisters despite your worn boots. Sullivan's mule, a cantankerous beast he's named Murphy, carries the heavier equipment, but there's still plenty for each man to bear. The landscape has changed, becoming more rugged, more remote. The hills here are thickly forested with pine and cedar, their sharp scent filling your nostrils with each breath. Streams cut through rocky valleys, their water clearer than the muddy, churned-up rivers where thousands of miners have been working. There's a pristine beauty to this country that stirs something in your chest, a reminder of what California looked like before the rush for gold transformed it. "Not much farther to Weaverville," Sullivan says as you pause to rest near a small creek. "Should reach it by tomorrow afternoon if we keep a good pace." Weaverville is a new settlement that's sprung up near the Trinity River, one of many instant towns created by the gold rush. According to the rumours that have reached the southern camps, rich deposits have been found there, gold nuggets the size of corn kernels just waiting to be scooped up. You fill your canteen from the creek, the water so cold it makes your teeth ache. The heat of the day has been building, sweat soaking through your shirt, making the straps of your pack chafe against your shoulders. But the water is a blessed relief, and you splash some on your face and the back of your neck before straightening up. "Do you really think the claims will be better up there?" you ask, not for the first time. The question has been nagging at you since you left the relative security of your established camp. Sullivan shrugs, adjusting his battered hat to better shade his eyes. No guarantees in mining, but virgin ground is always promising, and too many men working the American River now, every inch claimed and fought over. He gives you a sideways look. Having second thoughts? You shake your head, though in truth, doubts have been creeping in with each mile. Just wondering if we're chasing another empty promise. Might be, Sullivan acknowledges with the frank honesty you've come to appreciate from him, but I'd rather try something new than keep working a claim that barely feeds me. He gestures at the trail ahead. Besides, the journey itself has value. How many back east can say they've seen what we've seen? He has a point. Despite the hardships, there's a strange freedom in this life, a chance to see a country still wild and raw, largely untouched by the civilization that's spreading westward. The mountains rising around you, the vast stretches of forest, the rivers cutting through ancient valleys, these are sights few from your hometown will ever witness. You continue walking, the trail following the course of the creek for a while, before cutting up into the hills again. Murphy the mule snorts and balks at a particularly steep section, requiring both you and Sullivan to urge him forward, one pushing from behind while the other pulls at his lead rope. The stubborn animal finally relents, climbing the incline with reluctant steps, his displeasure evident in every movement. Cantankerous beast, Sullivan mutters, though there's affection in his voice. Still, he's better company than most miners I've known. The afternoon wears on, the shadows lengthening as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon. You're both looking for a suitable place to make camp for the night when Sullivan suddenly raises his hand, signalling for silence. You freeze, instantly alert. Living in mining country has taught you to recognize danger signals, and the tension in Sullivan's posture sends a warning chill down your spine. "What is it?" you whisper, scanning the surrounding forest for whatever has alarmed your companion. Sullivan doesn't answer immediately, his head cocked as he listens intently. Then, very carefully, he unshoulders his rifle, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Someone on the trail ahead," he murmurs. Heard voices. You reach for your own weapon, a 6-shot revolver tucked into your belt. The gold fields have their share of bandits, desperate men who find it easier to rob successful miners than to dig for gold themselves. The routes between camps are particularly dangerous, with travellers vulnerable and law enforcement non-existent. For a tense moment, you both stand frozen, straining to hear. Then comes the sound of laughter, relaxed and genuine, not the menacing tone you'd expect from those with ill intent. Sullivan's shoulders lose some of their rigidity, though he keeps his rifle ready. Around the bend in the trail appear 3 men, miners by the look of their equipment and the pans hanging from their packs. They stop when they see you, hands moving instinctively toward their weapons, the same wariness in their posture that you feel in yours. For a heartbeat, the two groups assess each other across 20 yards of dusty trail. Then one of the men, taller than his companions, with a red beard streaked with grey, raises his hand in a peaceable greeting. "Ho there," he calls. "You fellows headed to Trinity?" Sullivan nods, lowering his rifle slightly but keeping it in hand. "Aye. You coming from there?" "Left this morning," the red-bearded man confirms. "Worked a claim there for 3 weeks, but the ground didn't pay. Heading back to Sacramento now." The tension eases further. "These aren't bandits, but fellow miners. Just men like yourselves trying to find their fortune in California's streams and hillsides. How's the digging up at Trinity?" you ask, holstering your revolver as the two groups move closer together. The red-bearded man spits to one side. "Some are doing well enough, ground's rich in places, but it's no paradise. Hard work, same as anywhere." He eyes your packs and Sullivan's mule. "You boys got supplies? Camp's growing fast and prices are steep?" "We're provisioned," Sullivan answers. "For a while at least." The men exchange a few more words of advice about the trail ahead and conditions at Weaverville before parting ways, each group continuing in opposite directions. The encounter leaves you with mixed feelings. The Trinity diggings aren't the untapped paradise that rumours suggested, but they're not worthless either. Some men are finding gold, which is all you can really ask for. You make camp as dusk settles over the hills, finding a small clearing near the creek where you'd stopped earlier. Sullivan builds a fire while you tend to Murphy, unloading his packs and giving him a good rub down before tethering him where he can graze on the sparse grass. The mule nuzzles your hand in a rare show of affection, perhaps grateful for the end of the day's journey. Dinner is simple: salt pork fried in a small pan, hardtack softened in the drippings, and coffee boiled over the fire. The food is plain but filling, and after a long day of walking, it tastes better than the finest meal you can remember from back east. You eat in companionable silence, both too tired for much conversation. As darkness falls completely, the fire becomes your centre of light and warmth in the vast wilderness. Stars appear overhead, countless pinpricks of light in the black canvas of the sky. Away from the larger camps and settlements, the night is alive with sounds. The chirping of crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustle of small creatures moving through the underbrush. "Reminds me of home," Sullivan says unexpectedly, his gaze fixed on the fire. "Ireland has nights like this, clear and full of stars." There's a wistfulness in his voice you've never heard before. "Been 7 years since I left, longer than I ever meant to stay away." "Why'd you come?" you ask, curious about this man who's become your partner and guide, yet remains largely a mystery. Sullivan is quiet for so long that you think he might not answer. When he does, his voice is low, almost lost beneath the crackling of the fire. "The famine," he says simply. "Watching your family slowly starve changes a man, makes him willing to go anywhere, do anything to escape that fate." He pokes at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiralling upward. Gold was just a dream to chase. The real prize was just enough food to fill your belly each day. The revelation shifts your perception of your companion. You'd assumed, like most miners, that he'd come west driven purely by gold fever, by the desire for quick riches, but his motivation runs deeper, born of desperation rather than greed. It explains his methodical approach to mining, his satisfaction with modest yields that others might scorn as insufficient. "And your family?" you venture, unsure if the question is too personal. "My parents died in 46, sisters emigrated to Boston." He shrugs. "Send them what I can, when I can. Not much, usually." The admission seems to pain him. "You?" "Left a mother, father, 2 younger brothers," you reply. "Farm was failing. Thought I'd find gold, send enough back to save it." You laugh, a short, bitter sound. "Still waiting on that part of the plan to work out." Sullivan nods, understanding without judgment. So many miners carry similar stories, similar dreams. Few will see them fulfilled. "Get some sleep," he advises after a while. "Long day tomorrow if we're to reach Weaverville." You roll yourself in your blanket near the fire, using your pack as a pillow. Despite the hard ground beneath you and the chill that seeps up through your bedroll, exhaustion quickly pulls you towards sleep. The last thing you see before your eyes close is Sullivan still sitting by the fire, his face thoughtful in the flickering light, his gaze turned toward the stars, as if searching for something only he can see. Morning comes with a heavy mist clinging to the trees and settling in the low areas of the trail. You wake stiff and cold, your blanket damp with dew. Sullivan is already up, rekindling the fire from the previous night's embers and setting water to boil for coffee. "Storm coming," he says by way of greeting, nodding toward the western sky where dark clouds are gathering. "Best get moving. Don't want to be caught on the trail when it hits." You eat quickly, Coffee and more hardtack, the latter so stale it must be soaked in the hot liquid before it's remotely chewable. Murphy the mule is repacked, his displeasure at resuming the journey evident in his flattened ears and stubborn stance as Sullivan attempts to lead him back to the trail. The day's travel is harder than the previous ones. The trail climbs steadily, winding through forests that grow denser the further north you go. The air feels heavy with impending rain, the pressure building as the storm approaches from the west. By midday, the first distant rumbles of thunder echo through the hills. "Not far now," Sullivan encourages as you pause to catch your breath at the top of a particularly steep incline. "See there?" He points ahead to where the trail disappears over a ridge. Weaverville's just beyond that. Been there once before, few months back. The knowledge that your destination is near gives you a second wind. You push on, ignoring the ache in your legs and the raw spots where your pack straps rub against your shoulders. The first fat raindrops begin to fall as you crest the ridge, spattering against your hat and face like tiny, cold fingers. And there, spread out in the valley below, is Weaverville. It's larger than you expected. Dozens of tents and rough wooden structures clustered along what must be the Trinity River, a silver ribbon cutting through the green valley. Smoke rises from multiple chimneys and cooking fires. And even from this distance, you can make out the movement of people, tiny figures going about their business despite the approaching storm. "Made it," Sullivan says with satisfaction. "Now let's get down there before we're soaked to the skin." The descent into the valley is treacherous, the trail turning slick with rain, forcing you to pick your way carefully down the steep path. Murphy seems even less pleased with this development, digging in his hooves and requiring constant urging to continue forwards. By the time you reach the valley floor, the rain is falling steadily, and both you and Sullivan are thoroughly wet despite your efforts to hurry. Weaverville itself is a muddy, bustling place. The main street, really just a wider path between buildings, is churned into a brown slurry by countless boots and wagon wheels. Miners hurry between tents and wooden structures, most heading for shelter from the worsening storm. A few curious glances are cast your way as you make your entrance, but new arrivals are common enough that you don't draw much attention. Sullivan leads the way to what appears to be the settlement's only proper hotel, a 2-story wooden building with a painted sign proclaiming it the Trinity House. It's a grand name for what is essentially a large shed with divisions for rooms, but after days on the trail, it looks like luxury. "Might as well start our time here dry and with a real meal," Sullivan suggests. "Can ask about available claims over supper." The Trinity House's main room serves as both lobby and dining area, with a long bar along one wall and several rough tables scattered about. A pot-bellied stove in the centre radiates welcome heat, surrounded by miners drying themselves after being caught in the rain. The smell of wet wool and unwashed bodies mingles with the more appealing aromas of cooking food, some kind of stew by the scent with herbs and meat that make your mouth water after days of trail rations. You secure a room, little more than a closet with 2 narrow cots, for what seems an extortionate price, but which Sullivan assures you is reasonable for a boomtown like Weaverville. Murphy is stabled behind the building for an additional fee. Then, gloriously, there's hot food, venison stew with actual vegetables and bread that's only a day old rather than the rock-hard hardtack you've been subsisting on. As you eat, Sullivan strikes up a conversation with the man at the next table, a grizzled miner with a magnificent white beard that reaches nearly to his belt. "New in camp, are you?" the old miner asks, eyeing your trail-worn appearance. Sullivan nods. "Just arrived, looking for claims worth working." The old miner chuckles, a wheezing sound that suggests years of breathing mineral dust. "Ain't we all, friend? Ain't we all?" He leans forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "But I'll tell you, for the price of a drink, where the colour's running best these days." Sullivan signals to the barkeeper for another whiskey for the old man, who accepts it with a nod of thanks. East Fork, he says, after taking a appreciative sip. About 3 miles upriver, some Chinese fellows hit a pocket last week, took out near 50 ounces before others run 'em off, ground still rich thereabouts. You exchange a glance with Sullivan. 50 ounces is a fortune. At the current price of $16 per ounce, that's $800 from a single pocket, more than most miners see in a year of backbreaking work. Much obliged for the information, Sullivan says. We'll check it out once this rain lets up. The old miner nods, then coughs, a deep, racking sound that seems to come from the very bottom of his lungs. He spits into a handkerchief, and you catch a glimpse of dark stains before he quickly folds it away. Miner's consumption, he explains, catching your concerned look. Price of 20 years underground before I came to the places. Dust gets in your lungs, never comes out. He taps his chest. Doctor says I got maybe a year left. Why I came west. Might as well die under an open sky, maybe with a poke of gold to send home to the grandchildren. The stark admission sobers your mood. Mining takes its toll on the body in countless ways. The physical strain, the poor diet, the exposure to elements, and yes, the dust that scars the lungs. You've seen young, strong men aged before their time by a few years in the diggings. How will you look if you stay another year? Another 5? As the evening progresses, the Trinity House fills with miners seeking shelter from the storm, which has developed into a full-fledged downpour, lightning flashing across the sky and thunder shaking the flimsy building. Stories and information flow as freely as the whiskey. You learn that Weaverville has been established for only a few months, but has already grown to a population of several hundred. The diggings are productive, though as always, some miners do better than others. You also hear about new mining methods being employed upriver. Simple panning and cradling are giving way to more sophisticated techniques. Sluice boxes, long wooden troughs with riffles to catch the gold, are common now, allowing miners to process more gravel than ever before. Some operations are experimenting with wing dams to divert rivers, exposing the gold-rich gravels of the riverbed, and there are whispers of an even more transformative method being developed further south: hydraulic mining, using pressurized water to literally wash away entire hillsides believed to contain gold. Saw a hydraulic operation down near Nevada City, a miner at the next table says. Incredible sight, water shooting out like a cannon, tearing away the earth like it was nothing. They're processing more ground in a day than 50 men could in a month. Tears up the land, something fierce though, another miner comments. River below was running brown as coffee, all choked with mud and gravel, fish dying, farms downstream getting buried in silt. The environmental damage of mining is becoming more evident as operations scale up. Rivers once clear are now muddy, their courses altered, their banks torn apart by thousands of miners. Hillsides are stripped of trees for lumber to build sluices, cradles and shelters. Wildlife is hunted to near extinction to feed the growing camps. California's landscape is being transformed, perhaps irreversibly, by the hunt for gold. But such concerns feel distant and abstract compared to the immediate challenge of finding your own small piece of the wealth. Tomorrow, weather permitting, you and Sullivan will stake a claim on the East Fork and try your luck once more. The cycle begins again. New place, new hope, same dream of gold that brought you west in the first place. That night, lying on your narrow cot in the tiny room, listening to the rain drum on the roof and Sullivan's soft snoring from the other bed, you find yourself thinking of home again. The farm you left behind seems impossibly distant now, a memory from another life. You wonder if you'll ever see it again, if you'll ever walk those familiar fields or sit at your mother's table, surrounded by family. Or will California claim you as it has claimed so many others? Will your bones rest in some hastily dug grave beside a played-out gold stream, your dreams unfulfilled, your journey west ultimately futile? Such thoughts don't make for restful sleep, but eventually, exhaustion claims you, pulling you down into darkness as the storm continues to rage outside. Morning brings clear skies, the storm having blown itself out overnight. The world feels washed clean, the air crisp and fresh, the muddy streets of Weaverville beginning to dry under the returning sun. After a breakfast of fried potatoes and bacon, a luxury worth every penny of its inflated price, you and Sullivan prepare to seek out the promising diggings on the East Fork. Information is a valuable currency in mining camps, and you've learned to be cautious about following tips too blindly. But the old miner's suggestion of the East Fork seems genuine enough, and several others at the Trinity House confirmed that good colour has been found in that area. It's worth investigating, at least. You retrieve Murphy from the stable, the mule now rested and marginally more cooperative, if still given to expressing his displeasure through pinned ears and occasional stubborn halts. The 3-mile journey upriver takes you through country that shows the increasing impact of mining activity. Trees felled, underbrush cleared, the river's banks scarred by countless diggings. The East Fork itself is a smaller stream that joins the main Trinity River, its waters flowing clear over a rocky bed. But the signs of mining are evident here too, areas where the bank has been dug away, piles of worked-over gravel, the occasional abandoned tool. Several groups of miners are already at work despite the early hour, some panning in the traditional method, others operating cradles or small sluice boxes. Sullivan leads the way upstream, past the occupied areas, looking for open ground that hasn't been claimed. After about half a mile, you come to a promising bend in the stream where the water deepens and slows. Such spots often trap heavier materials, including gold, as the current deposits its load on the inside of the curve. This looks workable, Sullivan says, surveying the area with an experienced eye. Good access to water, ground that hasn't been touched much, and the bend should create natural deposits. Staking a claim is a simple process in these unregulated diggings. You clear a small area, post a notice describing the boundaries of your claim, and start working. As long as you actively mine the claim, it remains yours by the informal but generally respected law of the camps. You unload Murphy and set up a basic camp, a fire pit, your canvas stretched between trees as a shelter, your tools arranged for easy access. Then comes the moment of truth. The first test pan from your new claim, the first indication of whether this ground will yield the gold you've travelled so far to find. Sullivan wades into the stream, his pants rolled up to his knees, the cold water making him wince. He selects a spot near the inside of the bend, digs his hands into the gravel of the stream bed, and fills his pan. The familiar routine follows, dipping the pan into the water, swirling to wash away the lighter materials, tilting to let the water and sand spill out, leaving the heavier components behind. You watch anxiously from the bank as Sullivan examines the results, tilting the pan this way and that to catch the light. His expression gives nothing away until he looks up, a slow smile spreading across his weather-beaten face. "Colour," he says simply, holding up the pan for you to see. And there it is. Several small flakes of gold glinting in the sunlight against the black sand at the bottom of the pan. Not a fortune, but a promising sign. The ground here contains gold. Whether it contains enough to make your journey worthwhile remains to be seen. But for now, hope flares anew in your chest. You join Sullivan in the stream, the cold water numbing your feet almost instantly, but the discomfort is forgotten in the excitement of testing your new claim. Your own first pan yields similar results. A few small flakes, enough to encourage but not enough to celebrate. "We'll need to build a cradle at least," Sullivan says, as you both continue to sample different spots along your claim, or better yet, a small sluice, process more gravel that way. The next few days fall into a rhythm of hard work. You fell small trees and split them into boards for a sluice box. Sullivan, who has experience as a carpenter, directs the construction, showing you how to create the riffles that will catch the gold as water washes gravel through the box. Murphy is put to work hauling gravel from promising spots to the sluice, the mule seeming almost content now that the travelling has stopped. Other miners pass by occasionally, some nodding in greeting, others casting speculative looks at your operation. Word of new finds travels fast in mining country, and a successful claim quickly attracts attention, but for now you're left relatively undisturbed to work your small piece of the East Fork. The sluice proves its worth almost immediately. By channeling the stream's water through the box and shoveling gravel in at a steady rate, you're able to process far more material than you could by panning alone. At the end of each day, you clean the riffles, carefully collecting the concentrated heavy materials for final panning to separate the gold. And there is gold, not in spectacular amounts, but steadily accumulating in the small leather pouch you carry. By the end of the first week at the new claim, you've collected more gold than in a month at your previous location on the American River. It's not the instant fortune the gold rush stories promise, but it's enough to keep you supplied, enough to nurture the hope that a richer pocket might be just one more shovelful away. The physical toll continues to mount, however. Your hands, already calloused from months of mining, develop new blisters that burst and heal and burst again. Your back aches constantly from the endless bending and lifting. The cold water of the stream makes your feet and ankles swell, joints stiffening painfully each night when you finally stop work. Sullivan suffers similarly, though he rarely complains. You notice, however, that he's developed a cough, not the deep terminal hacking of the old miner with dust-scarred lungs, but a persistent tickle that seems worst in the mornings and evenings. When you ask about it, he dismisses your concern. Just a chill from the water, he insists, nothing to fret over. But you've seen how mining breaks men down, how the constant exposure to elements, the inadequate diet, the unrelenting physical strain gradually erode even the strongest constitutions. You wonder how long either of you can continue this life before your body simply refuses to cooperate any further. For now, though, the work continues. Each day brings new challenges and small victories, the satisfaction of seeing gold accumulate, however slowly. Each night brings bone-deep weariness, but also the deep sleep of physical exhaustion. And each morning brings the renewed hope that today might be the day you strike it rich, the day the East Fork finally reveals its golden heart. A month passes on your claim at the East Fork. Late summer gives way to early autumn, the days growing shorter, the nights increasingly chill. The gold continues to come steadily, not in the spectacular amounts you once dreamed of, but enough to accumulate a modest poke. You and Sullivan have settled into a comfortable routine, rising with the sun, working until dusk, taking turns cooking simple meals over the campfire and collapsing into exhausted sleep each night. Weaverville has become your supply point, a place to purchase food and tools, to hear news from the outside world, and occasionally to enjoy the dubious luxuries of a proper bed at the Trinity House and a hot meal you didn't cook yourself. The settlement has grown, even in the short time you've been here. New buildings going up weekly, the population swelling as word spreads of productive diggings in the area. With more miners come more businesses, a proper general store now, 3 saloons, a crude bathhouse where, for an exorbitant fee, you can soak your aching body in hot water, and a barbershop that doubles as a doctor's office for those who can afford treatment. There are even a few women in camp now, not just the dance hall girls and prostitutes who first arrived, but wives and daughters of merchants who've decided to put down roots. It's during one of your supply trips to town that you first hear about the incident at Murderer's Bar, a mining camp 20 miles downriver. 2 miners killed, their claim jumped by a gang that's been working its way through the smaller camps, using violence and intimidation to seize promising diggings. They call themselves the Sydney Ducks, explains the storekeeper as he weighs out beans and flour for your order. Started in San Francisco, bunch of Australian ex-convicts. Now they're moving into the mining country, looking for easy pickings. The news sends a chill through you. Your claim with Sullivan is isolated, vulnerable to just such predation. The gold you've accumulated, while not a fortune, would be tempting to those willing to take it by force. Anyone hunting these fellows? Sullivan asks, his expression grim. The storekeeper shrugs. Talk of forming a vigilance committee, but nothing's come of it yet. Laws thin out here. Man's mostly on his own for protection. You purchase extra ammunition for Sullivan's rifle and your revolver before heading back to the claim, a new wariness settling over you. The gold rush has always had its dark side, theft, claim jumping, violence, but it feels closer now, a shadow hanging over the modest success you found at the East Fork. That night, as you sit by the fire after another long day of work, Sullivan brings up the subject that's been weighing on both your minds. We should take precautions, he says, cleaning his rifle with meticulous care, sleep in shifts maybe, keep the gold in different hiding places. You nod, poking at the fire with a stick. Could try to bring in another partner or two. Safety in numbers. Sullivan considers this, his face thoughtful in the flickering light. There's those brothers working upstream, O'Malley boys, Irish like me. Seem decent enough. The O'Malleys, Brian and Michael, are working a small claim about half a mile up the East Fork. You've exchanged greetings when passing their diggings, but little more. Still, they've been friendly, and 4 men would certainly be harder to intimidate than 2. Worth asking, you agree. Tomorrow we could walk up, see if they're interested in joining forces. The conversation shifts to practicalities, how to reconfigure the claim to accommodate more workers, how to adjust the sluice operation, how to divide the gold. These are easier topics than the unspoken fear that's prompted the discussion, the very real possibility of violence coming to your small corner of the Trinity River. Sleep comes uneasily that night. Every snapping twig in the forest, every rustle of wind through the trees makes you start awake, hand reaching for the revolver you've taken to keeping beside your bedroll. The vastness of the wilderness, once exhilarating, now feels ominous, hiding unknown threats in its shadows. Morning brings no immediate danger, just the familiar tasks of stoking the fire, brewing coffee, and preparing for another day of mining. But the conversation with the O'Malley brothers can't wait. After a quick breakfast, you and Sullivan head upstream to their claim. You find the brothers already hard at work, knee-deep in the chilly water of the East Fork, operating a small cradle similar to the one you used on the American River. They're alike enough to be recognized as brothers, both stocky, red-haired men with weathered faces and calloused hands. But Michael, the elder, has a jagged scar running from his left eye to his jaw, the result of a mining accident in his past. They greet you with cautious friendliness, climbing out of the stream to hear what brings you to their claim so early in the day. Sullivan explains the situation, the reports of the Sydney ducks, the vulnerability of isolated miners, the potential benefits of joining forces. Michael O'Malley listens in silence, his scarred face impassive. When Sullivan finishes, he exchanges a glance with his younger brother before responding. Heard the same tales in town yesterday, he admits. Been thinking along similar lines ourselves. He studies you and Sullivan for a long moment. You fellows strike me as decent sorts, not prone to stealing or shirking work. Could be an arrangement might benefit us all. The negotiation that follows is straightforward. The 4 of you will work as partners, combining your claims into one larger operation. Gold will be divided equally after expenses. Each man will contribute his labour and existing equipment to the enterprise. And critically, you'll establish a proper camp with defensible positions, taking turns standing watch at night. The arrangement is sealed with handshakes all around and a shared drink from Michael's flask of whiskey. By midday, you're working together, already reconfiguring the sluice system to handle the increased capacity 4 men can manage. The partnership proves beneficial beyond just security. The O'Malley brothers bring different skills to the operation. Brian has experience with carpentry and tool making, while Michael knows techniques for prospecting that help identify the most promising gravel deposits. The work becomes more efficient, more productive, and your daily yield of gold increases noticeably. The camp too improves with more hands. A proper cabin replaces the canvas shelters built from logs and chinked with mud to keep out the increasingly cold night air. A stone fire pit with a cooking grate makes meal preparation easier. There's even a crude table and stools where you can sit for meals instead of balancing plates on your knees. Life settles into a new routine, the days marked by shared labour and the nights by rotation of watch duty. No threat materialises from the Sydney Ducks or any other quarter, but the precautions remain in place. In the uncertain world of the goldfields, vigilance is as necessary as water and food. October brings the first frosts, mornings when ice forms in still pools along the riverbank, and your breath clouds before your face as you begin the day's work. The cold water of the East Fork becomes almost unbearable, numbing your feet and hands within minutes of exposure. You develop techniques to cope, frequent breaks to warm extremities by the fire, rotating tasks so no one spends too long in the water, working shorter days when the temperature drops too far. It's during this time that Sullivan's cough worsens. What began as an occasional irritation has developed into frequent spasms that leave him gasping for breath, his face reddening with the effort. He dismisses concern, insisting it's just the cold air affecting his lungs. But you've seen the flecks of blood on his handkerchief, the way he struggles to hide his worsening condition. Should see a doctor, you suggest one evening as Sullivan recovers from a particularly bad coughing fit. There's that fellow in Weaverville, has a proper office now. Sullivan shakes his head stubbornly. Waste of good gold. Nothing he can do that time won't fix. But time doesn't seem to be fixing anything. If anything, Sullivan grows weaker as the days pass, his normally robust frame thinning, dark circles forming under his eyes from disturbed sleep. The cold and damp of late autumn mining are taking their toll on a body already weakened by months of hardship. The O'Malley brothers notice too. Michael pulls you aside one day while Sullivan rests by the fire, recovering from another bout of coughing. "He's not well," Michael says bluntly. "Seen it before in the copper mines back in Ireland. Lungs going bad. Might be consumption." The word sends a chill through you that has nothing to do with the autumn air. Consumption, tuberculosis, is a death sentence for most who contract it, especially in the harsh conditions of mining camps. There are no effective treatments, no cures, just a slow wasting away as the disease consumes the body from within. "What can we do?" you ask, watching Sullivan from across the camp, noting how his shoulders shake with suppressed coughs, how thin his wrists have become where they extend from his coat sleeves. Michael's expression is grim. "Not much, I'm afraid. Keep him warm, get better food in him if possible, but if it is consumption..." He leaves the sentence unfinished, its meaning clear enough. That night, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, you lie awake listening to Sullivan's laboured breathing from the adjacent bunk in the cabin. The man has become more than just a mining partner in the months you've worked together. He's a friend, perhaps the only true friend you've made since coming west. The thought of losing him to illness adds a new layer of dread to the already precarious existence you lead. Morning brings a new development. Brian O'Malley, returning from an early trek to check their animal traps in the surrounding forest, arrives at camp in a state of excitement. "Visitors coming," he announces. "Whole party of them, looks like. Spotted them from the ridge, maybe half-hour away." Everyone tenses at the news. Visitors could mean many things in the isolated mining country. Other miners looking for claims, traders bringing supplies, or less welcome arrivals like the Sydney Ducks. Sullivan checks his rifle despite his weakened state, and you ensure your revolver is loaded and accessible. The visitors appear just as the sun fully clears the eastern ridges. There are 6 of them, mounted on horses leading pack mules laden with equipment. They approach openly, without the furtive movements you'd expect from those with ill intent. Still, no one relaxes, until the party is close enough to be clearly seen. 5 men and, surprisingly, 1 woman, all dressed for the trail in practical clothing, their faces weathered from exposure to the elements. The leader, a tall man with a silver-streaked beard and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, raises his hand in greeting as they draw near. "Ho the camp," he calls. "Mind if we water our animals at your stream?" Michael steps forward as the spokesman for your group. "Moo, you're welcome to water. Where you folks headed?" "Trinity Alps," the bearded man answers, dismounting with the fluid grace of an experienced rider. "Geological survey for the Western Mining Association. Name's Harker. Professor James Harker of Columbia College." He gestures to his companions. "My assistants and guides, and my daughter Eleanor, who serves as our expedition cartographer." The woman nods in acknowledgement. She's perhaps 25, with brown hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes that take in your camp with keen intelligence. Having a woman in such a remote area is unusual enough, but one participating in a scientific expedition is extraordinary. Your surprise must show on your face, for she smiles slightly, clearly accustomed to such reactions. "We've been mapping potential mining regions throughout the Sierras and Trinity Range," Professor Harker explains as his party leads their animals to the stream, "documenting geological formations, water sources, mineral deposits, information that will be valuable as mining operations expand." "Long way from civilization for such work," Michael comments, his tone suggesting he's not entirely convinced by the explanation. Harker nods. "Science often requires going where others haven't, but I assure you, our purpose is purely academic. We have no interest in claim jumping or interfering with established operations." The tension eases somewhat, though not entirely. Any strangers merit caution in the Gold Country, but the professor and his party seem genuine enough, and the opportunity for news and conversation with new faces is welcome after weeks of isolation. You invite them to share your midday meal, a pot of beans with salt pork. Hardly a feast, but hot food is always appreciated by travellers. As you eat, Professor Harker shares news from the outside world. California has indeed become a state, admitted to the Union as part of the Compromise of 1850. The political wrangling over whether it would be a free or slave state has been resolved in favour of freedom, though tensions between North and South continue to build. More immediately relevant to your situation, he confirms the stories of the Sydney Ducks and other outlaw gangs operating in the mining regions, but he also brings word of a growing response. Vigilance committees forming in the larger settlements, makeshift courts dispensing rough justice to those caught stealing or worse. Law is coming to California, albeit slowly and unevenly, Harker says. The days of complete lawlessness are numbered, though I suspect the transition will be neither smooth nor entirely just. As the meal progresses, Sullivan suffers another coughing fit, worse than usual, perhaps triggered by the smoke from the fire or the exertion of helping prepare food for the enlarged group. He excuses himself, moving away from the gathering to recover. Eleanor Harker watches him with concern, then follows after a moment, carrying a small leather case. You observe from a distance as she speaks to Sullivan, her manner professional rather than pitying. From the case, she produces a small bottle and measures some liquid into a cup, which she offers to Sullivan. After a moment's hesitation, he accepts, drinking the contents with a grimace. When she returns to the fire, you catch her eye questioningly. "A tincture of wild cherry bark and white pine," she explains quietly. "It won't cure what ails him, but it may ease the symptoms somewhat. I've some medical training, not formal, you understand, but practical experience gathered on our expeditions." "Is it... You can't quite bring yourself to say the word. "Consumption?" She nods gravely. "Very likely, yes. The pattern of symptoms is distinctive. How long has he been coughing?" "Months now, but worse these past weeks." She sighs. The cold weather will only exacerbate his condition. He should be in a warmer, drier climate if possible. The mountain air here, especially in winter, will be hard on lungs already compromised. The advice, while delivered with genuine concern, feels like a cruel joke. Where would Sullivan go? How would he get there in his weakened state? And what would he live on if not the modest gold yield from your claim? These are questions without easy answers in the harsh reality of the gold fields. Professor Harker's party remains at your camp for only a few hours, eager to cover more ground before nightfall. Before departing, Eleanor leaves the bottle of tincture with instructions for its use, and the professor himself offers to carry letters back to civilization when their expedition concludes, a rare opportunity to send word home without travelling to one of the larger settlements. You take advantage of the offer, hastily writing a letter to your family. You're honest about the difficulties you've faced, but also share the modest success you found at the East Fork. You don't mention the constant fear, the physical toll, or Sullivan's illness. Some truths are better left untold to those who can do nothing to help. As the geological party disappears into the forest, heading deeper into the Trinity Alps, a strange melancholy settles over your camp. The brief connection to the wider world, to scientific pursuits and civilized conversation, throws into stark relief the isolation of your existence here. For a few hours, you were reminded of the life you left behind, of interests and concerns beyond the daily struggle for gold and survival. The reminder is both sweet and painful. Sweet to know that such a world still exists, painful to recognize how far removed from it you've become. Your hands, once suited for holding books and pens, are now calloused tools shaped by pick and shovel. Your mind, once engaged with ideas and dreams, now focuses narrowly on the practical concerns of extraction and survival. Have you lost something essential in this transformation, or have you gained something valuable, a hardiness, a self-reliance, a deeper understanding of what truly matters when existence is stripped to its fundamentals? These questions have no simple answers, but they occupy your thoughts as you return to the endless work of the claim. The sluice needs attention, the cabin roof leaks in one corner, winter supplies must be laid in before the weather turns truly harsh. The immediate demands of survival leave little room for philosophical reflection. November arrives with the first snow, a light dusting that melts by midday but serves as a warning of what's to come. The decision to winter at the claim, rather than seeking more comfortable quarters in Weaverville or one of the larger settlements downriver, was made weeks ago when Sullivan's condition made travel increasingly difficult. Now you all must prepare for the challenges of mining through the cold months. The work becomes more difficult as temperatures drop. The water of the East Fork burns like fire against skin, then numbs completely, making fine motor control nearly impossible. Ice forms on the sluice overnight, requiring precious time each morning to thaw before operations can begin. The shortened daylight hours mean less productive time, and storms can make work impossible for days at a stretch. But there are compensations. The gold yield actually improves as you dig deeper into deposits that have settled against bedrock over countless years. One particularly good day in mid-November produces more gold than any previous week, a pocket of flakes and small nuggets that elicits whoops of joy from everyone, even the increasingly frail Sullivan. The isolation grows more complete as winter tightens its grip. Trips to Weaverville become less frequent, reserved for absolute necessities when supplies run dangerously low. News from the outside world arrives sporadically, carried by the occasional traveller hardy or desperate enough to be on the trails in such weather. One such traveller brings word that the Sydney Ducks have been driven from the Trinity River region, their leader hanged by a vigilance committee after a particularly brutal robbery left 3 miners dead. The news brings relief, removing one source of worry from your already challenging existence. But nature provides dangers enough to replace the human threat. A storm in early December dumps 3 feet of snow in 2 days, the temperature plummeting to levels that make any work outside the cabin potentially deadly. For nearly a week, you're confined to the small space. Tension building as 4 grown men accustomed to constant physical activity find themselves with nothing to do but play cards, mend equipment, and try not to get on each other's nerves. Sullivan's health continues its decline, despite Eleanor Harker's tincture, which ran out weeks ago anyway. The enforced inactivity of the storm seems to accelerate his deterioration. He coughs almost constantly now, each spasm racking his thin frame, blood frequently staining his handkerchief. His appetite dwindles to almost nothing, and fever flushes his cheeks even as he shivers under every available blanket. You take on the role of his primary caretaker, helping him to eat the broth and softened bread that's all he can manage, supporting him on the increasingly difficult trips outside to relieve himself, sitting beside him through the night when the coughing prevents any sleep. The O'Malley brothers help as they can, but an unspoken understanding has developed. Sullivan is your responsibility, your friend, your burden to bear. One night, during a rare quiet moment when his coughing has subsided enough for him to speak, Sullivan gestures weakly for you to come closer to his bunk. "Need to ask something of you," he says, his voice a raspy whisper. You lean in, your ear close to his mouth to catch the faint words. "My gold," he continues. "When I'm gone, want you to send it to my sisters in Boston." He presses a scrap of paper into your hand. An address, written in shaky letters. "Tell them I was thinking of them. Tell them I found what I was looking for out here." The request knifes through you. It's the first time Sullivan has openly acknowledged what you've all known for weeks, that he's dying, that his time is measured in days rather than weeks or months, and the final part of his request feels like a lie. What has Sullivan found here but hardship, illness, and now death far from home and family? But you nod, tucking the paper safely away. "I'll make sure they get it, every last flake, and I'll tell them you were brave out here, that you never gave up." A ghost of a smile touches Sullivan's cracked lips. That much is true, at least. His eyes drift closed, exhaustion claiming him once more. You sit beside him as he sleeps, watching the laboured rise and fall of his chest, listening to the rattle that accompanies each breath. Outside, snow falls silently, adding another layer to the white blanket that covers the world. The cabin is warm enough, the fire well stoked, but a chill settles in your bones that has nothing to do with the winter night. Is this what the gold rush comes to for so many? Not wealth and triumph, but illness and death in a rough cabin far from home. The stories that drew thousands west spoke only of opportunity and adventure, of fortunes waiting to be plucked from the ground. They said nothing of the cost, the broken bodies, the ruined health, the lives cut short by accident or disease. Sullivan stirs in his sleep, mumbling words you can't quite catch, perhaps names from his past, memories surfacing as his present dims. You adjust his blanket, adding another log to the fire, these small comforts all you can offer against the approaching darkness. Sullivan dies on a clear, cold morning in late December. You wake to find him still and silent in his bunk, the laboured breathing that has filled the cabin for weeks finally ceased. His face looks peaceful, the lines of pain smoothed away. As if in death he's found the relief that eluded him in his final days. The O'Malley brothers help you dig the grave, a difficult task in the frozen ground. You choose a spot on a small rise overlooking the East Fork where the winter sun catches the water when it breaks through the clouds. It seems a fitting place for a miner to rest, within sight and sound of the stream that occupied so much of his life. There's no preacher to say words over Sullivan, no family to mourn his passing. Instead, you speak briefly about the man you knew, his quiet strength, his unfailing fairness, his determination to find a better life than the one famine had stolen from him in Ireland. Michael O'Malley recites what he can remember of a Catholic prayer, the words sounding strange and formal in the wilderness setting. Then you lower Sullivan's body, wrapped in his blanket, into the cold earth, and the three of you take turns filling the grave. Brian fashions a simple wooden cross to mark the spot, carving Sullivan's name and the date into the surface. It seems inadequate somehow, this rough memorial for a life ended so far from home, but it's all you can offer, that and your promise to deliver his modest accumulation of gold to his sisters in Boston. The day after the burial, you return to work on the claim. It feels wrong somehow, continuing the endless cycle of digging and washing as if nothing has changed. But what else is there to do? The gold doesn't stop being valuable because one man has died. The need to eat, to stay warm, to survive the winter doesn't diminish with grief. So you work, your body going through the familiar motions while your mind circles the same questions that have haunted you since Sullivan fell ill. Is this pursuit worth the cost? How many men have died, like Sullivan, chasing dreams of gold across this harsh landscape? And how many more will follow before the fever runs its course? January brings storms that make mining nearly impossible for days at a stretch. Heavy snow blankets the claim. Temperatures drop so low that the East Fork freezes over in places, and winds howl through the trees with such force that venturing outside becomes dangerous. During these periods of enforced idleness, trapped in the cabin with only the O'Malley brothers for company, you find yourself thinking more and more of home. The farm you left behind has taken on an almost mythical quality in your memory, a place of safety and abundance compared to the precarious existence you now lead. You remember the smell of fresh-baked bread in your mother's kitchen, the weight of a plough handle in your hands, the sound of your father's voice calling the cattle home at dusk. Simple things, once taken for granted, now precious in their absence. The gold you've accumulated since arriving at the East Fork is substantial, not a fortune, but more than many miners ever see. Combined with Sullivan's share, which you're holding in trust for his sisters, it's enough to consider the journey west a qualified success. Perhaps it's time to think about returning, about using what you've gained to secure a better future back east, rather than continuing to risk everything in the capricious game of gold mining. But such decisions can wait until spring, when travel becomes feasible again. For now, survival remains the primary concern. Food supplies are running lower than anticipated, the harsh weather having prevented hunting expeditions that might have supplemented your stores. Each meal becomes an exercise in careful rationing, ensuring there will be enough to last until conditions improve. February arrives with a brief thaw, temperatures rising just enough to melt some of the snow and break the ice on the East Fork. The three of you seize the opportunity to resume mining operations, working from dawn until dusk to make up for lost time. The yield is good, better than expected for winter diggings, and spirits lift with each flake and nugget added to your pouches. The improved weather also allows a trip to Weaverville for desperately needed supplies. You volunteer for the journey, eager for a change of scene after weeks confined to the cabin and claim. The trail is muddy and treacherous in places where melting snow has saturated the ground, but Murphy, who has survived the winter with his customary grumpy resilience, picks his way carefully, bearing both you and the supplies on his sturdy back. Weaverville has changed since your last visit. Many miners have abandoned their claims for the winter, seeking more comfortable quarters in town until spring. The population has swelled accordingly, the saloons doing brisk business, new boarding houses springing up to accommodate the influx. There's even a small theatre now, offering entertainment to men starved for diversion after months of isolation. At the general store, as you purchase flour, coffee, and other necessities, the proprietor shares the latest news. A company from San Francisco has purchased several large claims downriver and is bringing in machinery, steam-powered pumps and winches, that will allow year-round operation regardless of weather conditions. It's part of a growing trend across the gold fields, individual miners giving way to companies with capital to invest in more efficient, more productive methods. Days of the lone prospector are numbered, the storekeeper says. Wrapping your purchases in brown paper can't compete with steam power and hired labour. Company men work shifts round the clock, pull out more gold in a day than you or I might see in a month. The prediction rings true. You've seen the change beginning even in the remote Trinity River region, operations scaling up, methods becoming more sophisticated, the easy gold long since extracted, leaving only deposits that require significant investment to reach. The romantic image of the independent miner, pan in hand, discovering a fortune in some untouched stream, belongs increasingly to the past. What does this mean for your own future in the gold fields? The question occupies your thoughts on the return journey to the claim. If commercial operations are indeed the future of gold mining in California, where does that leave men like you and the O'Malley brothers? Become hired hands for these companies, trading independence for regular wages. Move on to more remote regions where corporations haven't yet established themselves. Or take whatever gold you've managed to accumulate and seek opportunity elsewhere. These questions remain unresolved as winter slowly loosens its grip on the land. March brings more frequent thaws, patches of bare ground appearing where snow once blanketed everything. The East Fork runs higher with snowmelt, making mining operations more challenging but also more productive as the water carries new material from upstream. And then comes a discovery that changes everything. Brian O'Malley, working a section of the claim that extends slightly up a small tributary of the East Fork, uncovers what appears at first to be just another good-sized nugget. But as he clears away more of the surrounding soil, it becomes apparent that this is something far more significant. A vein of gold-bearing quartz extending into the hillside, potentially far richer than the placer deposits you've been working in the stream bed. The three of you gather around the discovery, excitement building as you excavate more of the vein. It's narrow but well-defined, the gold clearly visible in the white quartz. This isn't just a scattered deposit laid down by water action over centuries. This is source gold, a primary deposit that could yield far more than you've extracted so far. But developing such a find requires resources beyond what you currently possess. Quartz mining means tunneling into the hillside, shoring up the excavation to prevent collapse, crushing the ore to extract the gold. It means tools you don't have, expertise you haven't acquired, capital you can't access as individual miners. That evening, gathered around the fire in the cabin, you discuss options. Michael O'Malley, always the most practical of your group, lays out the situation bluntly. "We've three choices as I see it," he says, ticking them off on his fingers. "First, we keep working the placer claim and ignore the vein. Seems foolish given what it might yield. Second, we try to develop it ourselves with what little we have, likely to get us killed in a tunnel collapse. Or third, we find partners with the capital and knowledge to do it properly." Partners meaning a company, Brian adds, his tone making clear his distaste for the idea. Like many independent miners, he values the freedom of answering to no one but himself. A company, Michael confirms, but we'd negotiate terms, maintain ownership interest in the claim, share in the profits beyond mere wages. It's a pivotal moment, you realise. The decision you make now will determine not just the immediate future of your mining venture, but potentially your entire trajectory in California. Do you cling to the independence that brought you west, even if it means leaving the richest prize untapped, or do you adapt to the changing reality of gold mining, embracing the shift toward more organised, more industrial methods? The debate continues late into the night, each man expressing hopes and concerns, weighing options against personal values. No clear consensus emerges before exhaustion finally drives you all to your bunks, the decision postponed but looming. Morning brings unexpected visitors, a survey party from one of the very mining companies you were discussing the previous evening. Led by a geologist named Whitmore, they've been examining promising sites throughout the Trinity River region, following up on Professor Harker's earlier expedition. The coincidence seems almost too perfect, raising suspicions among all of you that these company men somehow learned of your discovery, but Whitmore insists it's merely fortunate timing. They've been working their way systematically through the area based on geological indicators, with no prior knowledge of your specific find. We're authorised to make immediate offers for promising claims, Whitmore explains, his manner businesslike but not aggressive. Full purchase or partnership arrangements depending on the owner's preference. Fair market value with proper documentation. The offer he presents, after examining your quartz vein, exceeds anything you might have expected. The company, Trinity Mining Associates, proposes a partnership rather than outright purchase. They'll provide the equipment and expertise to develop the quartz vein properly, while you and the O'Malleys retain a 20% ownership interest in the operation and the option to work as salaried employees if you choose. It's a generous proposal, recognising both the value of your discovery and the reality that you lack the resources to exploit it fully on your own. Still, you request time to consider, unwilling to make such a momentous decision without careful thought. Whitmore agrees to return in 3 days for your answer, leaving a written offer detailing the terms. Those 3 days are filled with intense discussion among your small group. Michael favours accepting the offer, seeing it as the best way to maximise the value of your claim while minimising risk. Brian remains reluctant, valuing independence over potential profit. You find yourself torn between these perspectives, weighing practical considerations against the ideals that brought you to California in the first place. In the end, pragmatism prevails. When Whitmore returns, you present a counteroffer, the same basic arrangement but with 25% ownership retained by your group and guaranteed employment for at least 1 year at wages slightly above the standard rate. After brief consultation with his colleagues, Whitmore accepts these terms and contracts are drawn up on the spot. The transformation of your claim begins almost immediately. Within 2 weeks, equipment starts arriving. Steam-powered drills, ore crushers, lumber for constructing proper mine entrances and support structures. A team of experienced hard rock miners follows, setting up camp nearby and beginning the more systematic development of the quartz vein. Your role changes dramatically. No longer an independent prospector working with simple tools, you're now part owner of a commercial mining operation, learning the more technical aspects of quartz mining while supervising aspects of the work. The physical labour remains demanding, but in different ways. Less about endurance in cold streams, more about precision in following the vein, ensuring proper supports, operating unfamiliar machinery. The O'Malley brothers adapt differently to this new reality. Michael embraces the change, quickly learning the business side of mining operations and becoming an effective liaison between the company managers and the workers. Brian chafes under the more structured environment, eventually selling his ownership share to the company and heading north to try his luck in the newly rumoured gold fields of British Columbia, still seeking the independence that first drew him west. By late spring of 1851, the operation at what is now officially called the Sullivan Mine, your suggestion honouring your departed friend, is producing impressive amounts of gold. Your share of the profits far exceeds what you earned as an independent placer miner, accumulating rapidly in a proper bank account in Weaverville rather than as dust and nuggets in a leather pouch. But something has been lost in this transition, a connection to the land and the direct fruits of your labour that gave meaning to the hardships of independent mining. The romance of the gold rush, flawed and often illusory as it was, has given way to the more prosaic reality of industrial extraction. Gold is still being found, but the finding itself has become a business rather than an adventure. In June, you make the decision to honour your promise to Sullivan. Taking a leave from the mining operation, you travel first to Sacramento and then by steamer to San Francisco, carrying Sullivan's gold, now converted to proper currency, to arrange for its transmission to his sisters in Boston. The journey provides your first real exposure to the changes sweeping California in the wake of the gold rush. San Francisco in 1851 bears little resemblance to the sleepy port town it was just 3 years earlier. Now it's a bustling city of some 25,000 people, with proper streets, substantial buildings, businesses of all descriptions, and the constant activity of a major commercial centre. Ships from around the world crowd the harbour, bringing goods and more fortune seekers, despite the decreasing odds of striking it rich in the increasingly organised gold fields.